Welcome back to Left Anchor. I'm Ryan Cooper, and I am missing my co-host Alexi the Greek today. He is off gallivanting in other parts of the world, but I have a replacement guest, Mr. Will Stancil. We all know him. We all love him. Who is a Minneapolis resident and politician. And I wanted to get you on, Will, to talk about what the fuck is happening in Minneapolis. So thanks for coming on the show.
Happy to.
Yeah. And so I think we should start off by just talking about what is happening there in Minneapolis. I think that it's not quite clear, for people who are sort of seeing the highlights on the news maybe or social media. But you've been out there pounding the pavement in your car. So what is going on?
I mean, the gist of it is that there's just an ungodly number of ICE and DHS Border Patrol agents on the ground here. They have been behaving in really aggressive ways, nominally doing immigration enforcement, actually nominally doing fraud investigations because of the some of the benefits fraud that we'd seen here in Minnesota involving some Somali groups. But in reality, what they've been doing is just terrorizing neighborhoods, and so lots of aggressive actions in the street, heavily armed agents, large convoys rolling through nonstop. To give you a sense of the scale, we have 3,000 agents here in Minneapolis or in the Twin Cities, heavily focused around Minneapolis, as far as we can tell, really all over. And we have 600 Minneapolis police officers. So they are much more present on the ground than the Minneapolis law enforcement and the local law enforcement is. Obviously it degenerated into a violent. Well, you had the killing of Renee Good, which is awful. We've had some violent incidents, but then there's just every day there's many smaller violent incidents, abductions, tear gassings, small conflicts in neighborhoods. And then the city itself is organized pretty substantially to try and limit the damage and restrain them, primarily through rapid response networks here on the ground. Neighborhoods sort of self-organizing to monitor ICE agents in our midst, follow them as they move around the city and keep eyes on them, document and record their interactions with residents, and get information about people who may have potentially been abducted, document abuses, stuff like that. And so I have been pretty active in those efforts.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think the welfare fraud sort of pretext thing is maybe important to drill down on a little bit, because you had this, frankly, dipshit YouTuber, this right-wing guy, Nick Shirley, who made this video accusing a bunch of daycares of being fraudulent, that he went there and there were no children, and so that they were scamming the state, they were scamming the federal government for money. And later reporting from the the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, other outlets have proved that specific allegation was bullshit, but it happened in the context of a welfare fraud like sort of conspiracy that had happened like years ago, mostly during the pandemic. Yeah. And it was investigated by the Biden administration, the Department of Justice there, and people, back starting in 2022, as I recall, and people had gone to jail for scamming. And it's like, I mean, it's in some ways kind of the most American thing to happen in general, like immigrant population comes in and a small, tiny percentage, we're talking like a couple dozen people at most, figure out that they can scam the government. And that's what's always happened for the last 250 years.
So, and I'm going to say something. I'm going to talk about this, and maybe everything I say here is not going to be super popular. But first off, I mean, there really has been some fraud here in Minnesota. There was, it's called the Feeding Our Future scandal. It was COVID benefits, sort of food assistance. There was a very large network of people that were involved, basically not giving out meals, but making claims as if they had. It was a very large fraud. I mean, it was close to $1 billion that was given out. I think the lead fraudster, or one of the very lead fraudsters, was a white woman, actually, but many of the participants were Somali. Some of the food service places were Somali. Many people involved and not many, but a number of people involved in our local Somali political scene, had some connection to, fraudsters. Like in one notable case, pretty close connection. And then there has been, I'm going to say, so I ran for office a year and a half ago, and this was part of my campaign platform. There has been, I think, a certain laxness among the Democrats in Minnesota towards what I would describe as sort of NGO fraud, where you have NGOs and nonprofits that are providing services and that are overbilling or maybe even just fraudulently conducting themselves. And because these are people that are politically networked with Democrats, there's just not as much oversight as you want to see, and the money gets wasted and it degrades trust in government. Usually, it's not spectacular. Speaking our future was, that one was remarkably huge. And I think because of that, the Democratic political response has been like a little bit muted compared to what it ought to have been. I mean, that was what I said in my campaign. I mean, it was like, it was a problem and we need to crack down on this stuff because it would get out of control. The other thing I'd say is I agree with you. I mean, we have some of these just fraud with the NGOs. I mean, it's perfectly common among white Minnesotans, but we have the Somali East African community here in Minneapolis, and it is what is notable about it. It's a tight-knit community. It is the members speak a language that virtually no one outside the community can speak, and so as has been the case for many immigrant communities throughout American history. I mean, think back to how many mafia movies are there? You have an immigrant community, tight-knit, an urban enclave in some cases. It is obviously an environment that is conducive to a certain amount of fraud. And so it's not surprising that some of these nonprofit frauds, were popping up in the Somali community. With that said, we have many, many people from East Africa here in Minnesota. The vast, vast majority are law-abiding citizens, really great contributors to the community, doctors, lawyers. We have no one realizes this outside Minnesota. We have a large middle-class Somali community here, living in like the whitest, like affluent, suburbia, Eden Prairie. You can tell from the name, the city of Eden Prairie. It looks exactly like the name makes you think it looks. Large Somali community, very common for Somali middle-class people to move to Eden Prairie to some of these other suburban communities. And so the idea that this is like, Somalis are a criminal element among Minnesotans, as opposed to there is a small series of, there's a series of frauds that in some cases the main participants were Somali. That's a pretty important distinction. No one who lives here in Minnesota, I think, interacts with the Somali community goes, oh yeah, primarily fraud, like MAGA wants us to believe. It really is ultimately boils down to the fact that they're a useful scapegoat for the Trump administration because they're Black, Muslim, and immigrants.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think, that's where I was moving towards, and I think that, you, in the broader context of the pandemic, you look at the number of PPP frauds, including a lot of people who are explicitly like top level Republican donors, and in many cases elected politicians. It's not an uncommon thing. And I agree with you that defrauding the state is bad. But when you look at ICE, it's like ICE doesn't have anything to do with welfare. That is a completely separate activity. And when you look at the Somali American population, something like the numbers I saw were 58% of them are natural born citizens. And of the remainder of those, 87% of those are naturalized citizens. And so what on earth does ICE have any business going into Minneapolis to do welfare fraud? And the answer is they aren't. They aren't doing anything with regards to that. They're probably impeding.
This is something that people outside Minnesota don't realize. What you just said. The vast majority of Somalis in Minnesota, East Africans in Minnesota, are U.S. citizens. Most of the remainder are lawful permanent residents. There is not like any. The number of people who are here undocumented from East Africa, or even on a non-status other than green card, or it's minuscule. These are people who have lived in Minnesota a long time. They're well integrated into the community, well integrated into politics. I think because it's a relatively unusual ethnic group to encounter in a lot of the country, people think of it as strange. But here in Minnesota, it's just like it's part of the community, in a way that Italians are in New York. It's just not. And so there's assumption that, I think that Trump has been relying some on this assumption that, people will see, oh, well, all these people must be here illegally. And it's just completely false. It's completely false.
Yeah. You're talking about, a group of folks, where in a very familiar pattern, it's like, certain of them land in a particular place and they, tell their friends and family, and they set up a community and a network. And for the most part, like all the American people, they're just trying to make a decent life for themselves and their families. And
one thing that's actually funny about that, jump in, is that you will never meet someone who's more patriotic about the United States of America than a Somali American in Minneapolis. They love America, and a lot of them are kind of Republicans. Because it's kind of a socially conservative culture, and like they are very, very, very often very into the idea of like starting a business and making your own way, and lift yourself up by your bootstraps, and your family is very important. And it's like these are really fundamentally Republican conservative values. The number of Somalis I've talked to about politics, and I'm like I don't want to tell him this, but he should be voting for the other party. Like but the Republicans, it's funny because Minnesota Republicans sometimes have obviously been very comfortable with the way Trump is talking about this, because they had high hopes of getting votes from this demographic and probably could succeed, except Trump has turned them into persona non grata.
Yeah. Which is also a super familiar pattern from American history of immigrants being super attached to the country that gives them like a better chance, at least, of making a decent life for themselves, and also having, somewhat conservative social views. You look at, I believe George W. Bush won a majority of his Islamic, Muslim Americans in 2000.
It was always hilarious. I was during Trump's first administration, I remember this would happen every time. As like any place where you have a lot of immigrants, many rideshare drivers, Uber drivers are immigrants. I always try to, I want to always hear where'd you grow up? What's your family? Where do you live? I'm always very curious. And the number of conversations I've had with random people who are not wealthy by any means, because they don't like rideshare driving, it just turned into them just being, America is wonderful. I love America so much. I'm like, yeah, but Donald Trump. And they're like, oh no, we don't care about him. Donald Trump's great. America's great. And I'm like, I really think you should care about him. He doesn't like you at all. But like, it was like, that is the perspective. I mean, it's the idea that this is like hostile to America is insane. I'm more hostile to America.
Yeah. Yeah. And so is Stephen Miller. But so, let me bring it back to what's happening on the ground, so you've been like tooling around out there on the street in your Honda Fit. So right. Can you talk a little can you talk a little bit about your tactical piece of machinery? And
I don't want to disclose too much about my capabilities.
Don't give us your license plate number. This is classified.
They know my license plate number, I assure you. I mean, basically, the tactic that has proven very successful and restraining ICE, not stopping them completely, but restraining them, is neighborhood watch and observation and rapid response. So we have very large neighborhood channels, mostly on Signal, although there are others I think that exist in other forms that I don't know about. People are in, hundreds of people in them for each neighborhood, and so mine often has between 500 to 1,500 people in it. They're not vetted in any way, so I'm sure the cops and ICE and everyone is listening in too, but that doesn't really matter. And you have people walking with whistles just on their phones watching. You have people driving. That's what I do. We call them commuters, mobile patrols. And then we have people doing dispatch and plate checking, where people call in. People say, here's I saw a plate, it seems sketchy. There's a lot of indicators that something might be an ICE vehicle. Usually the best indicator is there's two guys in the front that are wearing a military uniform and a mask, but sometimes there's other stuff too. And you say, I saw this might be an ICE vehicle. We check the plate against their centralized lists that have been acquired through the various means. And we check against the list, and often you can verify that it is, or it's suspicious. Sometimes they'll have new plates, and we just have to sort of be like, well, there's guys with guns in there, so like I don't know, you do the math. And then we follow them. And a lot of the following comes down to the mobile patrols, the commuters like me. We try and get to where they are, or if they're passing us on the road, we just wheel in behind them real fast, and you just follow them. And sometimes People make a lot of noise, you honk your horn, blow whistles, trying to draw attention to get more people to follow them. But that's not always the safest if you're in an area that is a little more secluded, because they will jump out at you. So you just stay behind them. You try and keep a safe distance. You're not trying to menace them in any way. And you certainly don't want to get in front of them or obstruct them, because that is a federal crime and they'll charge you. But you just keep eyes on them. They'll try and lose you. But the reality is what they're doing here. They're jumping out, they're abducting people, tear gassing crowds, all that stuff. It is so aggressive and so, outside the bounds of the law, and really just common sense notions of how law enforcement ought to be conducted, that they can't really operate if they're being observed closely. And so when we follow, they run. They try and get away from us. They'll lead us all over the neighborhood. Sometimes lots of people have had weird things happen. To get out, give them a warning, arrest them, smash their window, drag them out. There's some lawsuits coming out of that, I'm sure. And then, I've had stories of people leading people back to their own homes. They'll go look up the plate, and then you'll follow them, and they'll just park in front of your house. So they, sort of, we know where you live. It hasn't happened to me. But usually what happens is they'll lead you around for a while, and they'll give up, and they'll get back on the highway, and they'll go back to base. It's not perfect, because we can't physically obstruct an arrest, even if it is an illegal, violent arrest. We can't physically impede them in any way. But it forces them, they know they're being watched. They don't want to be watched. They're spending a lot of time and effort to try and not be watched. And so they both, I think that they probably act less aggressively because they're being watched. And they're also expending a lot of time and resources to try and get away from us. And it really limits how effective they can be. In order to abduct someone, out of a busy intersection, if they weren't doing it this way, they could do it with 2 plainclothes officers in 20 minutes. But instead, they need 20 men in a military convoy, and they need to cause a near riot in the intersection with tear gas and chemical sprays and brandishing weapons and stuff. And it becomes much more onerous on them to do the thing that they are at least supposedly sent here to do, which is investigate fraud, obviously.
Yeah, right.
Presumably, someone in that convoy, they have an accountant in the back, working on his laptop. I don't know.
Yeah. These ICE guys who've had 47 days of training are certainly an expert in the federal bureaucracy about.
Yeah, they're scrolling through the spreadsheets back. They're looking for financial irregularities. That's what I assume is happening.
I'm curious though about it doesn't strike me as immediately obvious why. Just the presence of observers would prevent, that would stop ICE. Like, is it a numbers question or are they ashamed? How come when you show up, as frankly, a pretty white looking person, or others,
a little tiny car, it sounds like a go-kart,
what do you suspect is about that phenomenon of being observed that makes them, turn their tails?
I think it's a combination of, when I've seen people get abducted, they just run someone down the street and tackle them, drag them to a van, which is a really high risk way of doing it, because if anyone sees it, a crowd's going to start to gather. People are going to try really hard to get that person's name and identity. It's all getting recorded. It's, that person would be, if it is recorded, we do get the name and identity. Odds are, because they're not asking questions, they're abducting people off the street, that person is probably a U.S. citizen, and they'll just have to lead to them being immediately released. Or if they're, or if they are, not a full citizen, the support groups will get that person a lawyer, and they'll have to fight it out as opposed to just shipping out of the country in 24 hours. And so I think that it's just like they wanted to operate as this unaccountable secret police that can just do this stuff. Everyone runs and hides as they do it. And the other thing that happens, and this is generally the observers have been trained to not escalate like this, because it's dangerous. It is also, theoretically, if you get to the point where you're obstructing, it is a crime. But if a crowd gathers, some of those people will be taking cell phone footage and recording, but many of those people will just be mad. Like, the amount of public rage they have incited here in Minneapolis is hard to convey with words. If someone identifies an ICE car stuck in traffic at a major Minneapolis intersection, that car is going to be pelted with ice chunks. It's going to be, people are going to be, throwing things, screaming, blowing whistles. Other cars will just start following it organically, just because, I don't even know why. It's just an instinct. You just want, people are like, where are they going? Is there someone in there? Who is it? Mass men in our community. and again, this is like, it's not like an intention, but it's like this is the response that they have generated by acting the way that they have acted, by killing somebody, by regularly tear gassing major intersections and public places, and so they've created this environment where they have to operate in, with these lightning strike abductions, deploy, tear gas the intersection, get back in, roar off. It's the only way they can operate. And then the presence of observers who are just following and watching makes that harder. And so it's like it is turned into this thing where they're constantly trying to move around unseen. We are constantly just trying to figure out where they are so we can, and also warn the public, honestly, like if you have an ICE convoy coming down the street towards an elementary school that has a lot of immigrants or something, everyone get inside. Every business, I know all the business owners on my street through politics stuff. Most of the businesses on my street have an ICE plan. If ICE shows up, here's what all the employees means, and it is specifically you're targeting people of color. It's very obvious or very clear. It's very clear that's what's happening. All the employees of color go into this specific closet. It's a private space. We lock the door. And so they really rely on the element of surprise to do anything, and they lose it when the public is trying to keep their eyes on them. It's funny because it's interesting to think about the comparison between this and traditional police. I mean, I'm not like a big like police fan, but you can really see why, it has given me actually a better impression of the traditional police, because I have if you see a police making an arrest, 4 cars come up, officers get out, they're in uniform, they probably have, most of the time, have a name, an identifier. They'll make an arrest, they'll put the guy in the car, they'll take witness statements, they'll talk. If you want to go up to them and be like, hey, officer, what's going on? Usually they'll tell you. Usually say, oh yeah, whatever, we got a situation. Maybe not, they won't tell you anything too specific, but they'll talk to you a little bit. Then you can go online, you look up, you look up the time and place, you look up the arrest report, you figure out what it was about. It's all, it's all pretty public. ICE, when I've witnessed people being abducted by ICE, there's one of them that was very public. It was right in the middle of a major intersection. It was like a military, a convoy pulled in and just grabbed someone and went away. It was incredibly disruptive and violent and scary. The other one was a SUV that I was following, suddenly pulling into an alley, 2 guys jumping out, tackling a man, dragging him back into a Latino man, dragging him to the back of their van or into their SUV, and then roaring off. I was the only witness. If I didn't get his name, if I had not seen him, I don't think anyone would have known anyone had been taken. If he doesn't have family or someone that's checking in on him, as it is, because I didn't get his name, I don't think anyone involved with ICE Watch will ever know who he is or what happened. Yeah, it's just he's gone, and that by choosing to conduct themselves in that sort of secret police manner, they have created these dynamics where the observation has become a major way of opposing them.
I suppose if you define like crimes as being sort of like wounds in human society, like you always want to do that in under cover of darkness so you don't get caught.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things one of the things I keep thinking, and I've tweeted something to this effect a few times, is like, why do you run when I follow you? Like, you are the law, you are the government. And when I follow you, you run away from me. You go 90 down the freeway. You take sudden right turns. You try and do these like juking car maneuvers to get away from us. You are, why are you running? Like, I'm not doing anything. I will not physically obstruct you. I, know what the limits are in that regard. I'm just going to show up with a camera and I'm going to film what you're doing, and you cannot abide it. You run the moment you think you have a tail. And so, I don't know. They act guilty because they are guilty.
Yeah, a perception, an indication of knowledge of having committed like moral offenses, that people will disapprove of what you're doing, and so therefore you need to hide it. I guess my next question is like, how do you see the community defense like working out? I feel like what you've discovered is sort of the rule of, legitimate policing that has been discovered and then intentionally forgotten repeatedly over the years. Is that like, a community cannot be policed without the consent of the people that are inside of it,
Yeah.
or at least like a critical mass of the people.
Yeah.
Because like you're talking about, I mean, you were just saying in Minneapolis, 600 officers for a city of 500,000 people in a metro area of 3.7 million people. And even if it's 3,000 ICE officers, that's nothing compared to 500,000. You know, like, so numbers can be on your side if it comes to that. And if people are against you. And so like, where do you see this? Just like this egregiously violent, offensive, you know, and I mean, we've seen like literally just like a mother of a young child being shot to death, having her brains blown out in her car. You know, do you have a sense for where the sort of tactical elements of this are going to sort of like play out? Like, do they have a way to win?
Well, so I don't have a strong sense just because it's all gone so fast. I mean, a week ago, a week ago, oh my God, it was last Thursday. I was a normal civilian. I had never owned a gas mask. I never bought a car camera. I've never chased an armed convoy down the highway. So
you're learning a lot. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like a little bit of a different person I did last week. So I don't know where this is going. Obviously, you know, this sort of community policing, neighborhood watch situation, you wouldn't want it to be a permanent solution, both because, frankly, it's really stressful. I come home and my nerves are shot. Like I just want to lie on my bed or my couch and just like turn my brain off. I close my eyes and I just close my eyes and in my head, I'm just going up and down Lake Street. And every time I see a Jeep Wagoneer or a Ford Expedition, like my heart skips a beat. You know, there's certain cars they drive, there's almost always ice. And so I'm going to have PTSD when I see a Wagoneer in particular for the rest of my life. But so it takes a lot. And the other thing is that it's like not, you know, we experienced this in George Floyd, which was sort of a little bit of a trial run for this for Minneapolis. You know, in George Floyd, there was a lot of, during the rioting, there was a lot of rumors in the neighborhood, which I think were partly true, that there were agitators coming in to riot and disrupt. A lot of people came in once it became clear that the police were effectively on strike and there were no emergency services. You've got people coming to the city to cause trouble. A lot of arrests that kind of demonstrated that. And so we had neighborhood watch set up, but the reality is unlike ICE, where you have a car full of agents who are wearing Border Patrol uniforms and masks, and it's clearly them. And there are also thousands of them truly out there. I mean, you can confirm plates and they're really out there. Most of the things that were being reported back and then were hallucinations and mirages. Like, you know, we saw a sketchy truck with an out-of-state plate going down the highway, and then wild rumors and it's paranoia is all consuming. It was awful. And and so, you know, and one of the things you see here now is on slow days, because there are days like today was very, very, very slow in my neighborhood. At least, I mean, I'm getting alerts right now, so it sounds like ICE might have moved in the last few hours. But like when I was out this morning, it was very slow. I saw one car that was confirmed ICE. And people were reporting all kinds of crazy stuff. Someone kept reporting a Mini Cooper with tinted windows, and I'm just like, guys, that's not ICE. They don't drive Mini Coopers. I'm sorry. And they kept reporting it. I'm like, no, I promise. It's just not ICE. I mean, I understand. I appreciate your effort, but that's not ICE. But, you know, you don't want to have that sort of like neighborhood paranoia, obviously. You know, that's how you get in a situation, you know, where people are like looking out their windows at every single, you know, like young black man that's walking up the street. And so, you know, ultimately you'd want to transition to a more traditional policing model where there's someone who's, you know, this is their job and everyone else is to go about their lives. But the reality is right now the policing model doesn't really work because the police are outnumbered, and also there's all sorts of legal and political issues with the police interfering with ICE, which I don't really know enough to weigh in one way or another. But I don't think that the police are particularly helping ICE. They're also just not particularly involved in this. And so the community has to police itself in this way. And it has turned out to be, like you said, fairly effective because of the numbers situation. It is very difficult for me to describe the uniformity of public opinion, both that this is a big deal and the hatred of ICE and of the feds right now in Minneapolis. You walk into any public space in my neighborhood and any group of people, any given point you talk to them, they're going to be talking about ICE. It's all anyone wants to talk about. The number of people on the ground, the chaos, the fact that, you know, every single intersection at some point or other is getting blown up is like, it's just unignorable here. And so they have polarized the entire population of the city against them. And like you said, there's 450,000 of us, there's 3,000 of them. That's not a good situation for them.
It's not for the first time I've thought, in 2024, looking around, and being like, what is the problem that necessitates doing this?
There's no problem.
Things were fine until you people like swaggered into town and started just tackling people at random,
The first time I saw them in like a big situation is a convoy I'd been following jumped out, grabbed someone. I did not. It's funny because theoretically I'm there to take video, record, report where the location. And I got out of the car and I couldn't get my video camera on because I was trying to switch between signal and the video. And it's very hard, it turns out. And especially with touchscreen stuff in a situation like this, you're like, okay, close signal, open the camera, move the video sideways, widescreen, all that. Fumbling through it, can't get it done. And then something just snapped in my brain and I just started screaming at them, like, get out. Go home. You don't belong here. You're destroying my city. You're making it worse. It was fine before you got here. And I just went to each car in the convoy and pointed at the driver and said, get out. You get out. And the next one, you get out. No, get out. And then the guys got in my face. I was like, get out. And it was like, and I was like, I got done. And I was like, oh my God. Don't do that, by the way, if you get in this situation. A, you probably will get bear sprayed. And B, you're not really contributing. Lots of people are shouting. You don't need one more. But it's amazing how hard it is to avoid doing that. I had a journalist ride along when the second day or third day I did this, and we went by an ICE car, and we were stopped in traffic, across from each other. I was going this way, he's going this way, and we with our windows open. And I looked over him, and I was going to say something, and instead I just started screaming, go home, go home. I was like, oh my God, what just came over me? I don't know what that was. That scared me a little bit. But it's getting, that really visceral rage because of what you said, that I live here. It's not perfect, but it was people weren't hiding in their homes. Kids weren't afraid to go to school. I went to my local restaurant down the street from me yesterday, because we're trying to support local businesses, and they don't have a food menu because the kitchen staff didn't show up. We're having to make food deliveries to so many families in the neighborhood. On the rapid response networks, every night, every bar that's closing, they need a detachment waiting outside the bar so that no one jumps their kitchen staff or their bar staff as they go home for the night at 2:30 in the morning. This is insane. This is not a situation. We didn't need this before. We need this because the federal government has done this to us in a city that barely has any undocumented immigrants in the groups that they're worried about. So it's just what are we doing? And it's a terror campaign. That's the thing fundamentally that I think that people don't understand who don't live here. This isn't an enforcement agency that's a bit overzealous. And I've said this to a few people now, but this isn't an immigration enforcement agency. This needs better use of force, rules like the Democrats keep suggesting. This is a terror agency that's masquerading as a immigration agency. And it's the immigration guys is useful because the people they want to terrorize are people of color. So, close enough for them. But they don't have any real interest in immigration enforcement. If they wanted to deport people, they could do this with a third of the manpower, twice as efficiently, a third of the cost without any of the chaos. Send around people in cars with badges to talk to people, make arrests. You get more people that way. You wouldn't spend the money. But they don't want to do it that way because that's not what they're actually interested in. What they're actually interested in is brutalizing the non-white population of the city so they can make pictures that they can jerk off to on Twitter.
It's greatest country in the world.
I am pretty patriotic American, I will say, and I love my city and I love the people here and but these people, we gotta get them.
Yeah.
They know who I am, so I'll be careful what I say. But man, no ice.
Every country has some bad elements, and the bad elements in this one are running the show. But I think maybe to your point, we can address this really quickly. On this whole sort of abolish ICE conversation. I feel like they have demonstrated beyond any sort of rational argument that ICE does not deserve to, it can exist. Even if you believe in immigration enforcement, They aren't doing that. And so you got to start over. and like it, you could have a discussion, an argument about how immigration enforcement or
Sure.
at all, whether we should have, open borders or whatever. Like that's a question you could bring up. But like to have this stuff happening is totally unacceptable. It's intolerable in a country of, supposedly, freedom and democracy. Like we got to start over with this shit.
Yeah, I mean, look, personally, pretty much an open borders guy. Love immigrants. Think the country,
same.
More the merrier. But I understand a lot of people don't agree with me on that. Now, we can debate that. Fine, whatever. And I understand that politically, maybe it's non-viable to say that. Fine, whatever. We can vote and I'll lose. Fine. But the what we're doing now has nothing really to do with immigration. It's just not. It's only about immigration insofar as that these people see immigration as a way to transform the population from a white population to a non-white population. That's the only thing they care about immigration. They don't care if you're legal or not legal. They don't care if you follow the rules or not. They don't care if you're contributing to society, if you own a business, if you are, becoming a doctor or a lawyer, or if you're a street criminal. They don't care. They care. They look at you and they say, you look like you are a good white person or a bad, filthy, non-white person, and then they have gradations of non-white that they like more or less. And that's it. I mean, that's it. That's all it's about. And sometimes you see these ICE guys, and a lot of the ICE guys are not white. And I want to go to them and say, do you understand that after they're done with us, they don't like you any better, and they're going to come. They're going to come for you, but they're no way because they're all morons. It's the only way you end up working for ICE these days. I think it's got to be a real meathead. But I gotta say, some of these ICE guys also, you see some. There's different detachments. There's Border Patrol, and they're like paramilitaries, and they're really, really scary, and they're geared up. But some of the ICE guys, you see them, and you're just like, what on earth, man? There's one I saw. There's this great picture. He's wearing like a party shirt. He looks like he's got like this half ball. He's got these like transition lenses on, and he's got a tactical vest over it. He's got like baggy cargo pants. And it's like this guy left the casino at 2:30 in the morning, woke up, had some hair of the dog, and went out and decided to just destroy someone's family for all time. Like this guy, what is this guy doing working for the federal government? But anyway, I agree with everything you're saying there. There's just not, there's a category error, I think, with some of the Democrats in particular, where they say, well, it's the immigration enforcement agencies and we need immigration enforcement. That's unpopular. So we can't abolish the immigration enforcement agency. And it's like, they're just calling it the immigration enforcement agency. That is not its role anymore. It's got to be torn down to its foundation and rebuilt into something. Even if you think we need that, it needs to be rebuilt into that, because that is not what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a fair bit of, academic research about like the culture of institutions and stuff. Now that tends to persist over time. And I think with something like ICE, it's just beyond question that even if you agree with the idea of immigration enforcement, you got to start from scratch. You got to fire everybody and build from the ground up. And I mean, there's probably a conversation for another time, but yeah, I think we need a different, totally different model of immigration, law in general, from the courts to the border to everything else about it. But let me see, we got a few more minutes, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's right.
I got two more questions for you. Basically, the first one, how do you see the actual the Minneapolis cops, the police departments in Minneapolis and out? What is their reaction to the what's happening? And do you see any sort of potential for like innovating a new sort of detente, perhaps? We're talking about the epicenter of George Floyd. That was right there. That was like a couple blocks from where
it was
Renee Good.
4 blocks from where Renee Good got shot.
Exactly.
I think that this is a controversial topic. No one really knows what's up here. I can say there are probably people in the police department that sympathize with ICE.
Yeah.
There probably are. It's illegal for the police department to cooperate with ICE, and I'm sure that there are some examples of them doing it anyway. And also true of the state troopers and the sheriff's department and some of the other law enforcement agencies. With that said, you do not see the cops and ICE together. Like, you just don't see it. ICE will be one of the things that's so creepy is you'll have this deployment of military ICE guys with assault rifles and smoke grenades and whatever, just absolutely destroying an intersection. They blocked off the intersection. They're firing at people in the crowd. There's tear gas everywhere. Everyone's choking and gagging. They're grabbing someone's screaming, everyone's screaming, someone's screaming to get dragged into a van. It's a scene that if you saw it, you think, oh my God, like civil war has broken out. And there is not a police officer in sight. Nobody. And I've seen it over and over and over. And I'm just like, how it's so bizarre to see this. And there's just no sense that it's just us and them, but there's no cops. And which is both, there's a positive and negative. And the cops aren't there helping. And the cops intentionally are not there helping. And I have heard lots of stories that basically the cops are like, these guys are total jokers, they're clowns, they're undertrained. They don't, they're making our jobs miserable because we're out here trying to domestic violence or whatever, and or drug arrest, and here's someone who's firing pepper balls into a crowd, a mob that's like ready to riot. And on the other hand, obviously, as a local, it would be nice if you're being attacked to have your police show up and help you. With that said, I will say they're outgunned by a lot.
Yeah,
like by a lot, and both in the kinds of munitions and also the number of guys. And one of the worst case scenarios here, which is not by any means impossible, is that something does happen, and Trump is like, okay, we're going to deploy Apache helicopters to Minneapolis now. Like, I can chase a Ford Expedition in my Honda Fit, but I can't do much if there's an attack helicopter. Like, at that point, it's a real bad situation. So like I understand that there's some sensitivities there. I don't know what the correct line is. I actually have our mayor, who is not super popular with the left, but I think he's done a pretty good job. There have been parts where he's been a little, I wish he'd said a little more, but he was also been very aggressive. He's never minced words about this is an occupation, you need to get out. And then the governor has been a little less aggressive in his language, but it's also like not really minced words. It's an occupation, you need to get out. And I appreciate that no one wants to be the person who fires the first shot in a civil war. So like that, it is a complicated situation. And like, it's funny, you will be in you'll be one of three tail cars blasting down Lake Street, being maybe a little fast and loose with traffic laws. Maybe there's a red light that they try and time, and you're like, yeah, no way, no way, bucko. I'm not that stupid. And you'll go flying by a cop car. There's there's two cars behind you, they're all honking their horns, and the cop car's just like,
what?
They're not stopping us.
What?
They're not stopping us.
I didn't see a thing.
Okay, I got something to do. Not bad. That's not my business. It's just like I appreciate it because they've probably seen me do some stuff that like maybe I should. Maybe I think when there's a light changes, you're supposed to let the oncoming traffic go first. But like I'm not going to do that if there's an ICE car over here, And so there's it's like the cops are. I don't think that they are too sad to see ICE get hounded.
Yeah. I would have to imagine, just sociologically speaking, like it would take a tremendous amount of sort of preparation and training to prepare a police officer to like take on federal law enforcement.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just like not a realistic thing, I think. And with that said, if the Minneapolis Police Department wants to rehabilitate itself locally in one fell swoop, getting into a shootout with ICE caravan, they will be lauded as heroes in the biggest, 180 you've ever seen.
I would, I mean, if I were in the department, I think what I would aim for is sort of malicious compliance stuff, or just like Leslie Nielsen in the Naked Gun type, just pratfalls, just like slipping in front of the ICE.
I don't know. I don't have any inside sources on this other sort of rumor, but I have to say that is a little bit of the vibe I get is that, it's kind of like your immigration stuff is your business. I've heard stories of people, for instance, someone said this, I think on Blue Sky. I said, because when you're tailing these cars, sometimes you tail someone who ends up being a cop or, detective or press or whatever. And, and they'll come up and say, they'll say, I'm police, please, I'm not immigration. I've got nothing to do with immigration. And everyone's like, and the thing is the observers also, if we identify someone as a cop and we have no indication that ICE is, we'll usually sort of hang out for a little bit and make sure they aren't working with ICE because there's a lot of paranoia about them working together. But the moment you feel like, oh, it's just the cops doing cop stuff, like that's not our job. We're not worried about that. We just leave them alone.
Yeah. Okay, so my last question is, what is your advice? Having had some experience literally on the ground, on the streets, confronting these guys, what should others do to prepare for the quite likely happening of ICE invading your city?
There is one very important thing. So I've got a lot of people message me, oh, should we come to Minneapolis and drive around? The reality is that what we're doing, we can do it really well because we know the neighborhoods like the back of our hands. And it's so, like people can say, ICE at this intersection, and I know how to get there. I don't have to look at a map. And so you can't really come here and help that much unless you know it really well. People want to donate. Honestly, this is all it's local networks. They're mostly decentralized. There's not a great place to donate to. Maybe some of the immigrant support services. But reality is we don't need that much money. I apologize to any group that does need money. I just killed their donations. But the thing that you can do locally is start building the communications channels and networks of social networks. That is what makes this possible. It's the hard part here. Obviously, the part that everyone wants to hear about is oh, you're driving around looking for federal agents. That's the easy part. You can just get up and do that. But you couldn't do it if you didn't have a network, a neighborhood network that you can talk to all the time. That is constantly updating you about sightings, about car here, convoy here, people have a car here. That is the backbone of this whole thing. If that's dense enough, you don't even need people in cars because there's people in every block anyway. Yesterday someone called in a report of a raid. It was actually a false alarm, but it was 3 blocks from me. So I'm literally take off sprinting from the coffee shop I'm at. I get in front of it, I'm panting. It's 10 degrees out. I'm about to puke because I haven't run in about a year. I'm the 4th person there. In 3 minutes. And then within the next 5 minutes, 100 people showed up. People were coming out of the apartment building confused because it was suddenly a mob. And we said, oh, we heard there's a ICE raid. And the residents start crying because they're oh my God, the whole neighborhood literally showed up because we thought the ICE was here. We're safe, kind of. We feel so much safer now. Building those networks is something you can do now. You don't have to wait. It doesn't have to be huge at the start. You just find some like-minded people, get them in a signal chat together, tell other people that might be interested, say, hey, we got a little chat, you can join it. And then it's ready. And I didn't do this beforehand, but when things started to go down here, asking around what you can do, someone said, hey, there's a signal chat. We'll add you. And then I added 10 people to it. And so they went, the first day I was in it, there were 400 people in local neighborhood chat. The second day, there were 1,500. They can grow fast once they exist, but you can get them off the ground now today. And that really makes your neighborhood and your community so much more resilient when they do show up.
Yeah. And Signal, to be clear, that is a messaging app that is end-to-end encrypted. It is somewhat resistant to, federal incursion. Not a guarantee, but...
Oh, I'm going to say something else about that too, actually. Because one thing I do, and it's a little bit of a critique of some of the people doing this. I want to be clear that people are doing this. I mean, some of them are brave. They're incredibly brave. I have I can't even express how much admiration I have for what they do. I'm a sort of public figure still here. So it's I have resources. If something were to happen to me, I would abduct it. I give the lawyer in 30 seconds. These people don't have these resources and they're turning out anyway. But one thing that people do is they do let sort of a concern over security get in the way of effective organizing. Your security doesn't come from the fact that they don't know who you are. They will be able to figure out who you are really quickly if they want to. Your security doesn't come from the fact that they can't see you, wearing a mask, whatever. Don't has someone asked me once, oh, should I not bring my ID if we go on patrol together? I'm like, no, bring your ID. Don't be an unidentified person because then you're never coming home. Your security comes from the one thing mainly, which is numbers. If there are enough of you, they can't arrest us all. They can't shoot us all. They can't pepper spray us all. There are, like I said, there's probably overall people in my neighborhood of 40,000 people, probably 3,000 to 5,000 people involved in rapid response in some way. They have 3,000 officers here. They probably have a few hundred jail cells. What are they going to do? They just do not have the guys to deal with that level of response. And so, if you have a make a trade, sometimes you have to make a trade-off between advertising and recruiting and anonymity and security. Always choose to expand the network rather than to be more anonymous. This doesn't need to be a secret. You're doing this.
Yeah, what you're talking about isn't revolutionary terrorist cell.
We're not guerrillas. I'm very intentional not to break the law when we do this. Those left turns notwithstanding, because it gives them an excuse to arrest you. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to be a guerrilla. You don't have to, you just need to keep eyes on them and have a large enough network that they're always being watched. And it has been so effective in keeping them. You can see the frustration when you chase them onto the highway And then I always sort of, once we get past the sort of last exit for the neighborhood, because then I know they're fully out. I'll zip by them, and they'll give you the finger. Like, they know the moment they're being followed. They'll give you the finger. Someone will give you a little mocking thumbs up, or they'll film you. And I always just sort of give them, give them a little, I'm watching you, or like a little peace sign or something as they go by. And you turn around and do it again.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap it up. Will Stancil, thank you for coming on the show. We will if you set up a GoFundMe for a new transmission for your Honda Fit.
We're not there yet, but it may the day may come. I push that thing to its limit a little bit.
But yeah, we will post that if and when it comes up. But anyway, thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
We will see you in the next episode.